AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, is set up for decades of growth ahead. Not a year, not 2 years, not like a little short term. No. They're setting this company up for decades of growth ahead. Now, when it comes to AMD, semiconductor company, right? Lisa Su leads this company. She basically had this company increase their stock price by about 40-fold since shortly after she became CEO. Incredible. When Lisa Su first got to this company in its first year, I can tell you what, AMD was not respected. They were the joke of the industry. No one took them serious. It was not a good situation, AMD. A lot of people were talking about this company is going to go bankrupt. Shortly after Lisa Su took over the company, the stock price was trading under $2 a share. They were so far in the gulag, people thought they were going to zero. It was a no jokers, holy smokers situation. It was dire. And Lisa Su and the team at AMD have now built this into one of the most respected companies in the entire world, not just in the semiconductor industry. They're one of the most respected companies in the entire world, point blank, period. And she and the team accomplished that in 10 years. Now, if they could take a company that was thought to be probably going to bankruptcy, in the gulag, under $2 a share, right? And if you don't know, in the gulag, I call it stocks that are under $5, right? If they could do that from taking this company from a bankruptcy candidate to one of the most respected companies in the entire world in 10 years, what can Lisa Su and the team pull off over the next 10 years? If they just pulled that miracle off over the last 10 years, I ask you that. And I think it's very important, right? And Lisa Su, I don't think she's leaving AMD anytime soon. She seems very committed to what they're doing, what they're up to here, and moving very, very fast at this company. They just did a good interview a few months ago with Bloomberg. She seems very committed to the position, right? Now, when it comes to AMD, you're going to understand the AI market, right? And you're hearing all this about NVIDIA selling all these AI chips. That's what you hear about constantly. If you pay anything attention to the semiconductor industry, oh my gosh, NVIDIA is just selling so many AI chips. They're making so much money. It's true. But you got to understand the chips that NVIDIA is really selling right now, these are great for training. Now, there's a difference between training and inference, okay? Training is a process of building an AI model, which makes sense, right? All these big tech companies are all building these AI models, right? That are very complicated, very complex. It's all like a building process right now. And NVIDIA's chips are what is seen as the best of the best when it comes to training of these models. While inference is a process of using the model to make predictions. Training is a one-time process, while inference is an ongoing process. Now, the important thing to understand about this is Lisa Su and AMD, they believe that inference, according to Lisa Su, she believes inference, and by the way, Lisa Su doesn't just throw out things to throw out things and just say this and say that. If she says something, she means it. She believes that inference is going to be a far bigger market long-term than training. Now, why is that key? Because Lisa Su also believes that AMD is the most well-positioned for success in inference. And so if you're thinking about what is the biggest opportunity from, let's say, 2026 to 2036, right? Based upon what Lisa Su believes, and once again, I wouldn't really go against her, it looks like the biggest opportunity is inference, and AMD is the most well-positioned for that. So what do you think is going to happen to AMD's revenues and profits over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? And remember, this is just one market AMD's in, right? They're in a lot of different markets. But this market matters significantly. This is the big dog market. And so when you're thinking about where AMD's revenues might be 5 years out, 10 years out, it's going to be a night and day difference versus where the company's revenues were in 2023, 2024, okay? It's going to be like, wow, they were way down there back then. It's a night and day difference, okay? So this part is very important you understand what's going on there. Now, additionally, back in August, AMD announced they're going to do this acquisition of ZT Systems to expand data center AI systems capabilities with the acquisition of hyperscale solutions provider ZT Systems. Now, this is really setting AMD up for 2026 and beyond. This is a big buy for AMD, by the way, about a $4.9 billion buyer. But And this is setting up AMD for 2026 and beyond. This puts AMD much more into competition with NVIDIA over the coming years, right? You have to have these solutions if you're really going to seriously compete with NVIDIA. And the other thing you have to have is you have to have software capabilities if you really want to compete with NVIDIA over this next 10 years. And guess what other acquisition they did? Well, this was back on August 12th. AMD completes acquisition of Silo AI to accelerate development and deployment of AI models on AMD hardware. AMD today announced the completion of its acquisition of Silo AI, the largest private AI lab in Europe. The all-cash transaction valued at approximately $665 million furthers the company's commitment to deliver end-to-end AI solutions based on open standards and in strong partnership with global AI ecosystem. Very, very key. This is all setting up AMD for the next 10, 15 years, okay? So Lisa Su's putting all the chess pieces together. There's no doubt Jensen and NVIDIA beat AI to the punch, or beat AMD to the punch here, but that doesn't mean this is one battle in a long war. And just because you get up in one battle does not mean you win the war in the end, right? Now also remember, there's plenty to go around for all types of different companies here. NVIDIA can win, AMD can win, ARM can win, Broadcom can win. There could be a lot of companies to win, because here's what Lisa Su and AMD said in late 2023, and I wouldn't be surprised if their expectations are even higher now, okay? AMD boldly declared that the total addressable market, the TAM, for data center AI chips will reach $400 billion by 2027, representing compound annual growth CAGR of more than 70%. So we're talking about there's plenty to go around here. This is not like some little finite market that only one company can win and no one else wins, okay? Now, additionally, there might be a fear of like the Mag 7. These companies spend so much with NVIDIA chips specifically, right? And so Microsoft, Meta, Google, Amazon, Tesla, these sorts of companies, and obviously way more companies than just those, they spend a fortune, an absolute fortune on AI chips, right? But keep this in mind, okay? Everybody needs to keep this in mind. Even if these companies slow the growth of CapEx, who's going to get hit the most by that? Is it going to be AMD? No. The one that would be most negatively affected is NVIDIA, because NVIDIA is the one that's already doing unbelievably massive numbers, right? These companies are already spending tens of billions of dollars a quarter on NVIDIA chips. So if there's a slowdown in CapEx, AMD, because they're so small in that market relative to NVIDIA is the one that feels it much more. Like AMD could still grow at a rapid clip for the next at least 5-10 years in this market, even with a slowing of CapEx. That's important to understand, right? The law of large numbers start to catch up with you a bit here if you're NVIDIA over the next few years, right? No, this is AMD looking at 1000xstocks.com. This is what's projected based upon analyst expectations for AMD's revenue. I like what I see. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if AMD comes in and beats these numbers. I would not be surprised at all. Additionally, this is where we're at right now when it comes to earnings per share of AMD. This is where we're projected to go here. A long Donkey Kong runway of growth when it comes to earnings per share. The earnings per share you're going to see, have seen in 2024. When we look back at this 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out, we're going to chuckle. We're going to be like, geez, AMD, were they only doing that for earnings per share back then? It's going to be a night and day difference. No different if you looked at AMD today versus 5 years ago or certainly 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, they were talking about AMD might be bankrupt. AMD might go under, right? And now you look at AMD and you're like, oh my gosh, this is one of the strongest companies in the world. Incredible. Now, here's my projections for AMD over the next few years, right? Based upon where I have their revenues going, their net income, earnings per share, I believe they'll be able to command somewhere around a 30 to 40 PE given the 20% plus top line growth, 30%-ish net income growth, which puts the stock, keep in mind, I don't care where the stock is in 2025, 2026, because this is more just buying time for me. Like I'm just buying the stock right now. And as a long-term investor, I don't care where the stock is in 2025, 2026. It doesn't make a difference because I'm not looking to get out of the stock. 2027 is when I first start caring about where AMD stock is. 2028 is when I start caring more, right? Because when we start talking about 3 years out, 4 years out, or beyond, that's when I could potentially start to take profits in stocks after they've gone up immensely, right? So 2027, based upon my projections here, we can call it the stock should be somewhere between $275 and about $366. And today it's, low $100 range, right? 2028, based upon my projections here, and these projections are done through 1000X stocks. This is one of my favorite features on there. This will put the stock somewhere around $350 to about $475 in 2028, which is going to be a compound annual growth rate on the low end of 30%, on the high end of 40%. I like that. I like that a whole lot. And as AMD's, remember, when AMD starts to build out these profits bigger and bigger, the earnings per share, guess what they're probably going to do? They're probably going to do either more big acquisitions to help the company get it to even a better position, to a position for the next major cycles and even, markets we aren't even talking about today, right? But additionally, you could see this company doing massive share buybacks, right? And you could see it do it both. And so AMD sets up very, very well, I must say, right? And one last thing I want to touch on here. I don't know if you guys follow me on my reaction channel. It's called Jeremy Lefebvre Makes Money. But I was bringing up a point here recently on that reaction channel, right? Where I react to videos, articles, it's upgrades, downgrades, things like that. And I said, AMD, people got it really messed up in regards to NVIDIA and AMD. They think that AMD has to beat NVIDIA. Like there's some sort of false assumption out there that like NVIDIA has to go to 0 in order for AMD to win. No, that doesn't have to happen at all. There's plenty to go around here. NVIDIA could be its $5 trillion market cap, and AMD could be $1 trillion market cap, or $2 trillion market cap. There's plenty to go around. There's plenty for these companies to win. And if you look throughout history, AMD and NVIDIA, especially over the last 10 years, when one of them wins, the other one ends up winning. Sometimes one has to play catch up to others. Sometimes NVIDIA stock is outperforming AMD. Sometimes it's vice versa. But then, hey, there's a lot to go around here. There's a massive amount. And remember, we're going to be talking about new chip markets 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, 10 years from now, that we're not even discussing today. It's not like these AI data center related chips for training and inference, that's it. No. Of course, there's going to be new chip cycles for new products, new capabilities over this next number of years that we're not even discussing today, that are going to give AMD new massive opportunities, NVIDIA new massive opportunities, right? There's going to be new, huge, major tech companies built. So keep this in mind, folks. There's a long runway of growth for the next decades, honestly, decades. These chips are going to need to be needed. And, you got to understand there's a very special workforce at a company like AMD. Hey, it's Jeremy. I hope you really enjoyed that clip here today. What you looking at in front of you right there? That's the 6-figure Hall of Fame. Do you want to see the next one? That's the 7-figure Hall of Fame. Now, that is my private group. Those are members of my private group that have scaled to 6 figures, multi-6 figures, 7 figures, multi-7 figures in their stock market portfolio. They say you are the average of the 5 people you associate with. If you're somebody that is having trouble finding other long-term investors that are focused on building their wealth over the coming years, finding like-minded folks, look no further than my private group. We've got a tremendous amount of people. We're consistently talking with each other, learning from each other, researching companies together, sharing news about our different companies, right? We do all that inside my private group. If you would like to apply to join us in there, go down in the description area. There'll be an application down there. You can click on that and you can apply to join us in there and take your game up to a much higher level and associate with the type of folks that you actually want to associate with. So, AMD downgraded at Wolfe Research as firm expects slower GPU revenue growth. First off, let me say this. I do think this is important to say this right from the beginning because I'm a new AMD shareholder. I just started buying in the stock very, very recently, right? But I definitely see a sentiment that people are sick and tired of these analysts coming out and downgrading AMD. I see a lot of comments, people like, man, they're downgrading us again and downgrading again, right? And it goes in this whole advanced money destroyer, they call it, right? And all those sorts of things. So, I can't speak for the people that have been in AMD for the past year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm just coming from my perspective. Somebody's been in the stock for like a month, right? AMD was in focus on Thursday as investment firm Wolfe Research downgraded the semiconductor company, citing slower data center GPU revenue growth than previously expected. Quote, as we highlighted following our visit to Asia last month, so talking December, we think the setup into earnings is difficult for AMD. Now, first thing is, the first sentence anybody writes in regards to a stock, always really important because it's going to tell you kind of the framework of how they're thinking, right? This is a very short-term call, is it not? We think the setup into earnings is difficult for AMD. Okay, like, as a long-term investor, I don't really care. I just care that AMD's revenue is going to certain numbers, net income's going to certain numbers over the next few years. I don't care if it's a difficult setup or not, right? Original design manufacturers' build plans suggest only modest quarterly growth this quarter from fourth quarter 2024 run rates. We estimate data center GPU revenue in the $1.5 to $2 billion range for the fourth quarter and $7 billion for the calendar year, that's CY calendar year, based on those checks. Well below buy-side expectations of $10 billion in our prior estimates of $10.8 billion. We model $1.75 billion in data center, that's DC, data center GPU revenue in the first quarter 2025 and flat quarterly growth for the balance of the year. The analyst also lowered his rating on AMD to peer perform. So basically he's just saying it's going to do as well or as bad as the semiconductor stocks do, right? From outperform, and removed his price target. His price target was $210. Isn't that up 80, 90% from here? Tell me if my math is wrong. I think my math is correct on that. Isn't that 80 to 90% upside from where the stock is today, right? Crazy. In addition to potentially weak data center GPU revenue, the analyst said he expects slow PC seasonality, continued weakness in gaming, and essentially no recovery in embedded, at least for the first half of this year. Despite those negatives, the analyst said AMD's upcoming launch of its MI350 AI accelerator should be significant catalyst when it launches later this year. It should be huge in the back half of, certainly 25 into obviously 26 and beyond, right? He said he expects it to be noteworthy redesign and upgrade compared to the recently launched MI325, which only increased memory loading compared to AMD's initial MI300. Now, do keep in mind, AMD is going to continue to innovate and come out with new chips pretty much quarter in, quarter out. I don't want to say quarter in, quarter out. I mean, they're going to probably launch some sort of chip almost every single quarter, right? But as far as the big data center GPU related type chips, those are probably, at least once every year, right? They're going to keep pedal to the metal and keep pushing forward on that. So, that's not going to slow down anytime soon. No, in terms of them coming out with new chips. No, at the end of the day, when I look at this, right, this sounds to me, what does it sound like to me? It sounds like exactly the same things everybody's been complaining about AMD. Oh, they're taking longer than we wanted them to take to ramp data center chips, right? And AI chips. And so, revenue is only going to be, it sounds like the same exact story we've heard time and time again recently in regards to AMD. And as a long-term shareholder, I just don't care anything about that. I just don't care anything about that. I believe AMD is extremely well positioned, especially in inference over this next several years, because you got to understand, right now, there's a lot of training going on with these GPUs, right? And so NVIDIA is phenomenal for training. Not to say NVIDIA is bad for inference and not to say AMD is bad for training, right? It's just if I kind of view it the way Lisa Su views it, right? She views, at the end of the day, kind of reading through the tea tree leaves here, she views NVIDIA as being the phenomenal chips for training these AI models. But she believes, from what I hear, that inference is actually going to be much bigger opportunity long term. And she believes AMD is the most well positioned for that, which means AMD could benefit massively from that really over the next 10 years. Like we could say AMD's not, their Super Bowl is not even right now. Like you could make an argument that right now is NVIDIA's Super Bowl, right? Like this is NVIDIA's time to just absolutely tear it up and dominate. But you can make a strong argument that AMD's Super Bowl isn't actually until 26, 27, 28. Like we're still, a while out. That doesn't mean AMD is not going to grow. Certainly AMD is going to have phenomenal growth, right? But the other thing I just kind of push back on here is just this kind of very short-term thought process about are they going to meet the numbers or hit the numbers or beat the numbers the next quarter, right? Because at the end of the day, I love to look at 1000X and I love to pull up the charts feature and look at on trailing 12-month basis specifically, right? Because quarterly is not going to tell you really the story. Trailing 12-month basis really going to tell you the story. It's clear as day we have started an uptrend in regards to AMD getting their revenue growth back on the right track, right? Clear as day. But the thing that's more impactful is, we're using our data provider here in compiling analyst estimates. It's very crystal clear that AMD is going to likely be growing and growing and growing and growing for years, not months, not quarters, years to go in the future. I like to be part of companies that are going to likely have years of future growth, right? And so, once again, I look at this time period as not a time to be selling AMD. I look at this time period as a time to be a buyer of AMD. Like, I've never been a buyer of AMD ever. And for me to say now's a great time to buy AMD, it's got to be something here that, is pretty darn compelling. And this is pretty darn compelling to me. Now, AMD also got initiated coverage from Loop Capital here, and they said they had a buy rating. So what's going on with Loop Capital and why are they bullish on AMD? So AMD was on the spotlight on Tuesday, and once again, this was 2 days ago, as Loop Capital initiated coverage of Dr. Lisa Su's led company with a buy rating and a $175 price target. Remember, the other guy had a $210 price target on the stock, right? You know what else it makes me think, to finish off with that last guy? Sometimes I wonder if an analyst like that is embarrassed. Serious. You have a $210 price target on a stock, you think it's going to 210, and the stock just keeps going down and down and down, and it's $110 something dollars, right? Eventually, you might get embarrassed. You might get pressure from the top down on you saying, what's going on here? How you got a 210 price target on it? This stock's not even getting anywhere close to your price target here. And I feel like sometimes these analysts feel like they got to make these short-term calls because, I don't know, maybe their job's on the line. I don't know, or they're embarrassed or things like that, right? Because if that analyst had his 210 price target for probably quite a while, and obviously it didn't come true, and obviously we know where the stock is today. It's got to be tough for those type of folks, Shares of AMD have traded more in line with peers with dominant revenue exposure to mature end markets. Examples are PC, smartphones, industrial, says Gary Mobley wrote in a note to clients. Quote, in our view, shares should more accurately reflect some degree of success in accelerated computing. Examples are GPU-based data center compute, XPUs, etc. The market share expansion opportunities in general purpose compute within PC and general server market. The latter has become more front and center in recent months given the tribulations at Intel. Yeah, Intel's a whole situation there, right? Delivering a bit deeper, the analyst said there are several investor debates going on with AMD right now, including whether it's actually a beneficiary or casualty of artificial intelligence and accelerated computing. I agree, that is like a big debate that's going on right now. Is everybody trying to figure out, is this going to be a huge boom for AMD over the coming years or a huge bad thing for AMD over the next few years, right? With Moore's law coming to an end, and some believe it already has ended, performance gains for processor are getting harder and harder and may be non-extinct at 4 nanometers, 3 nanometers, and 2 nanometer nodes, the analyst wrote. AMD is at the cross-section between the changing system hardware architecture of general-purpose compute and accelerating compute, the analyst said, adding that investors are wondering whether AMD's progress in GPUs for data center will be enough to offset the general-purpose CPU server market. Other questions include whether NPU-based edge AI apps can boost the replacement cycle for PCs, if AMD can exploit Intel's woes and gain share in both PC market and CPU general server markets, and to what extent ARM and its licensees encroach on the traditional CPU market, right? Yeah, whenever you're talking about custom chips for especially a lot of big tech companies, right? That's going to be a market, but you got to understand this chip market is so incredibly massive. It's ridiculous. It's incredible, right? The TAM here is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Like, it's not like this is a small market. So, that's the thing people don't understand. There's plenty to go around for NVIDIA, for AMD, for companies like ARM, for companies like Broadcom. There's plenty to go around here for everybody, right? Our view, we're talking about these big tech companies are spending tens of billions of dollars a year on these chips, right? And honestly, they got to continue to put that money up. Our view is that AMD will prove more triumphant in these market shifts versus what the equity market seems to give the company credit for. Mobley also noted that investor sentiment is quite low, for sure, due in part to its weak PC sales. Additionally, investor expectations for AI GPU sales in 2025 may have come down from $10 billion to $8 billion, analysts Yeah, sounds like it. The other guy was in the 7s, right? Nonetheless, the analyst said that AMD will be able to take an additional 10 percentage point of x86 CPU market share from Intel by 2028 in both PCs and servers, while ARM will grow slower than most expect. That's an interesting prediction. Lastly, AMD should be able to grab 20% of data center GPU market by 2028, with custom AI only accounting for roughly 15 to 20% of the market and NVIDIA controlling the rest. Based on these assumptions, it is possible for AMD to generate $55 to $60 billion in fiscal year 2028 revenue, and at a high 50% gross margin. AMD could have 11 to 11.50 in non-GAAP EPS. Yeah, and if the stock, let's say in 2028, fiscal year 2028, if they're doing $11 at EPS, how do you value a company like that? You're going to value it probably about 30 times, is my guess, as long as AMD still had top line and bottom line growth of 10% plus. So you'd probably slap a 30 multiple on that, which puts the stock in the low 300s, right, come 2028. Which, once again, if we're talking about a stock in the low 300s come 2028, and it's a stock that's in the 110s today, it's a huge W. And that's why I say, this is why I say, folks, sell me every AMD share they can sell me right now. I will gladly buy them. If they want to sell them to me at 130, 120, 110, 100, 90, I don't care. Give me your AMD shares. I'll gladly take them off your hands because I believe AMD is going to $300 to $500 over the next few years. And so all this mumbo jumbo about one quarter might be better than the other and this and that and this and that, it's all going to be irrelevant over time, in my opinion. All that matters is that AMD is now going to go through a several-year growth cycle as a company, right? Top line and bottom line. And when it comes to margins. And when you could talk about a company trading, remember, AMD is not trading at some super high multiple. If AMD was trading at a super high multiple, if you look at AMD's forward P on this stock, right? If it was trading super rich, I'd be like, but look at the forward P is 26 on this stock. 26. Are you flipping my flapjacks? Like, that's not bad at all. Like 26 forward PE for AMD, give it to me. Like, come on. Like that's not crazy at all. If AMD was trading at a 56 forward PE or 76 forward PE, I feel very different, right? I'd be like, it's priced in a lot of the future growth that's coming here. We haven't even priced in almost anything, in my opinion. Like, this is just value in the company based upon if they had mid-single digit growth over the coming years. And I'm like, I think their revenue growth and EPS growth will be a whole lot higher than single digits over the coming years, right? So once again, I look at AMD and I see a pretty incredible opportunity, in my opinion, because I think this next many years is going to be pretty darn exciting. So that covers AMD.